Well, hey friends, welcome back. It is Wisteria Pruning Day. Now, this is actually a wisteria that I historically have not been in charge of. I was noticing last year that it had gone really wayward, and so it's time for me to jump in. I've asked my neighbor's permission, and we're gonna do a lot of rehab pruning on this particular wisteria. Now, wisteria is a heavy lift in the garden. I'm not gonna tippy-toe around the subject. It's a heavy lift, not only from a maintenance perspective, but also like a preparation perspective. So since wisteria is something that a lot of clients ask for in their kind of wish list when we're meeting, I like to be really honest about what's involved. Let's run that down. First and foremost, you have to have structure. For most wisteria, a 4x4 post is not going to cut the mustard. It needs something beefy. So think like 6x6, 8x8, giant pergola, something to that effect. The next thing, you need to be ready to invest in this plant, right? So this is not what I like to term a Ron Popeil plant. This is not set it and forget it. We are highly touching this item at least twice a year. And it's not even like a hydrangea bush that you go in and you just clip all the heads and then you're off to the races. This is twice a year going through the entire vine and pruning it back. So when you start into a project like this, or say you inherit a property that does have a wisteria, wintertime is actually going to be the perfect opportunity to give it a good once over, because as I'm up here on my ladder, I'm noticing a lot of things. I'm actually noticing that, for example, this main branch right here, it's actually been cut. So this entire thing won't leaf out in the spring. It'll just be dead. I actually really have my work cut out for me here. So I'm gonna go through, I'm going to be looking for anything that is dead or damaged, and then I am gonna be taking my growth points all the way back. What I'm gonna be doing is from every major intersection, I'm gonna cut it down to about 2 to 3 nodes, just depending on the shape that I want to see. And I'm gonna show you those at a little bit of a closer angle. Now, if you go any lower than 2 nodes, what could happen is if we have a late frost, which we are prone to have here in Seattle, I could end up losing that entire growth point if I'm only relying on one bud. So I like to hedge my bets, take it to 2 or 3. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull out anything that is dead, diseased. This previously had been cut with a hedge trimmer, which is not a recommended method. It does work, but you end up with more damage and less visibility. The other thing, we are gonna be assessing the shape. So I'm gonna be coming in here with a really discerning eye. I want to have a really nice structure. I don't want this kind of like spaghetti noodle mess I've got going on behind me. So this is going to probably look a little savage, but I'm ready to do battle. Are you ready? Let's get after it. To start off our project, I actually just want to give you a really up close look of a nice tight bud formation. We've got a little bit of dead here, so I always like to take that off. And then what we want to do is we want to count up 2 to 3 buds. Now this one already has kind of like a terminal end, so I'm not going to worry about that, but we can count 1. There's a little one down here on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, okay? And then what you're going to do is you're going to angle your cut right above that. So do you see how I'm almost resting like the bottom of my little snips on top of that bud? And then I'm going to angle my cut away from the bud, and I'm going to snip. Okay, let's do one more because I really want to give you a solid advice on what we're doing here. So right here we can see bud number 1, bud number 2, bud number 3. So I know this is where I'm going to make my cut. I position my snips right above it. I'm angled away from the cut, and then I snip. Okay, so now this is what we are looking for. We've got really beautiful, super clean cuts. And in fact, right down here, check this out. This one is actually broken. But I can see right here, I've got 1 bud down here. I've got 2, and I have a 3rd bud right below that break. So I am actually going to come in here Well, I might have to do this backwards. There we are. So I'm going to come in right above that bud and do a little snip. And now what has resulted is this kind of end here. This is like prepped and ready. This is your finished product. So I'm going to go all the way down and I'm going to prune everything so it looks approximately like this. And this is what you want to see. Instead, let me show you what I'm working with. This is a hot mess express. I have serious work cut out for me. Cross your fingers. Say a little prayer if that's your thing. And then I want to show you one more thing, because right here, do you see what I spied? I think the yard crew that came through were a little exuberant, because you can actually see right there where it's been cut from this main branch. So everything up here, unfortunately, that entire cluster has got to go. So I'm going to try to prune it down to a singular branch and retrain it over my neighbor's arbor here. Okay, so this is actually going to be a really slow uphill climb, but I'm going to start with the dead and dying, because there's a lot. So like right here, I'm just even in here looking, it's falling apart on me. So look at this. So when you have a vine that's been overgrown, a lot of times you have so much dead that really one of your main jobs is just pulling this out. This is actually great because I'm going to get rid of a lot of the moss at the same time, and we're going to end up with a plant at the end of the day that actually has its shape again. You know, we're like giving it a new lease on life. As I'm pulling these things out though, one thing to keep in mind is I'm going to pull them out in smaller chunks, because if I try to pull out massive amounts at any given point in time, I risk snapping off buds, damaging the plant even further. Wisteria is a very durable plant, but you still want to minimize damage because I want to have beautiful blooms in the spring. So all that having been said, let's start. This feels like a dissection. This feels like high school dissection. But I can tell right now, this guy, it's already dead. So we're going to get cutting. Okay, this entire thing is dead, and so I'm going to follow it out. This one that I have my hand on, get that guy out, and here we are. Whoa! Oh my gosh, okay, let me snip that. Holy cannolis. Oh my gosh, do you see all these feathers just flapping through the air? Y'all, I need a new coat. That is the long and the short of it. I need a new coat. Okay. Now, coming down here, this wisteria is wrapped right back up on itself, but I have a beautiful, and I do mean a beautiful cane right here. So I'm very, very gingerly teasing this away from my body. Let's actually do a little cutting while we're at it. Okay. That's actually gorgeous. What am I smelling? I think her Sarcococa might be in bloom. Oh my gosh. Sarcococa is one of my favorite spring scents. It's like that fresh breeze you need during a cold winter. Okay, look at this. Okay, what I've done, actually this one is broken here, so we'll take that off. But we've got beautiful buds here. Actually, this one, 1, 2, 3, that looks good there. This one is dead. That one is good. And what I love is this guy right here. So let me actually, 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna do that. And then I'm gonna start training this over Michelle's arbor. Oh my gosh, I hope she loves it. And then probably what I'll do is leave this one kind of down here, and I might come back through and actually tie off some of these just to give them a little extra help, little extra training. And some of these, it's gonna be really tricky to figure out where things are headed, but I can tell, actually, I'm pulling on this one. This thing is dead. Okay, and that slid out really easily. So this whole thing is dead. And like I said, this is gonna look aggressive, but when we are done, she's gonna look fabulous. You guys, this is crazy. Okay, off to do battle. Here we go. Okay, now it's a little hard to tell, but when you are doing a project like this and you know there's dead wood in it, your dead wood is actually gonna be a little bit more gray. And when you pull on it, funny enough, it feels lighter. It almost feels hollow. So just keep an eye out. So when you see me working my way through here and I give something a little tug, I'm actually trying to see if it's alive or if it's dead. Oh, I'm also trying to see what it's attached to. So I want to take you on my neighbor's side to show you a couple things because they have done just fabuloso job of growing wisteria. First of all, they are not growing it right up against the fence. They haven't tried to have it loop around their fence posts, none of that. They have it growing away from their fence line. Next thing, do you see how if we look down this fence line, we don't have any rogue vines that are trying to make their way back through the fence? I actually feel like that is the number one thing I see with folks who try to grow wisteria is they just are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have it wrap around this. And if you do that, you are gonna end up with completely destroyed fence posts. Also, when you bring home that tiny vine from the nursery, look at what it becomes. This one, actually, what's interesting is the main trunk right here, it actually died. And then what has taken over are all of these newer vines that are growing up and around. And then when there are things like this that come up, we actually just come in here and clip them off. And that is how you maintain a really nice, tidy growth habit. I want to show you the other one because that one is equally as impressive. So this is probably the more robust of the two. This one is actually starting to push on our fence just a little bit here. And that is to be expected. This is a very robust plant. What I usually do is I come in here and actually I'm going to take one of these off too. Wisteria will send up quite a few little vining elements off. And for me, with this first part of the wisteria, you want to keep it really nice and tight. But as it gets up higher and higher, you're going to have a lot more of those vines kind of branching off in different directions. Keep it as tight as humanly possible and let your branches go crazy once they're well above your head height. Okay, so I want to show you a couple other things. I prefer to do wisteria pruning with a really sharp pair of Felcos or other snips. You can use those ratcheting ones if those are easier on your hand. However, if you don't have those, I don't recommend these because this is just like not enough precision. This is what you would use on like a hedge. Don't use this. That's what Brian used last time. But I would, oh man, I love these things. These things are fabulous. And for some of these, like, do you see how big this one is? You might want to get in here. And this is going to be much easier to take off a big hunk like this. And if you have a wisteria that has gone a little bit wayward, meaning you haven't been out here to prune it in a couple years, you're going to want to have something like this as a backup because there are a lot of branches that at the very least, like, I mean, look at this one. I can kind of see my three little guys from here, my three buds. Boom. Not the prettiest, but if you need a couple extra inches to reach, this is a very good tool to have in your arsenal. Now, while I'm kind of in here, I wanted to touch on one last thing that I'm doing that you're probably noticing is I'm actually thinning my wisteria at the same time. So you can look at what I've done here and then the spaghetti mess that is awaiting me further down the line. This is probably going to be a 2-day project. But you really want to just kind of come through here, get out all of the dead, and then start mapping a shape. And like all of this stuff was actually laying further down the fence line. So now that it's more tidied up, I've actually laid it on top of the structure here. This structure, by the way, it has been here for a very long time. It predates Brian and I, but this top piece is probably due to be replaced. Well, this is a pressure treated 4x4. And I'm actually really surprised by how well it is holding up. Like I said, typically, if a client asks me to install wisteria, I'm going 6x6 or bigger because she is that much of a beast and also that worth it. Okay, friends, I have made it about 16 feet, which is not very far, but this is slow and steady. This is an investment project, and it's probably going to stretch over the span of 2 to 3 days just because of how intensive this is. But it's a really amazing thing to do that you want to like put on a podcast and chill out for a little bit. And also look at these gorgeous wisteria seed pods. These are so beautiful. And just as a side note, if you do have kids or pets, these are super poisonous. But like most things, just know how to handle them. So while I'm doing this in winter time, this is actually only one of 2 times I'm going to prune this. And as you can see, this is why I call wisteria an investment plant in your property, because this is not something you just like set and forget. You are on this for hours at a time every single year. So your pruning window is really between like November and February. So this is a job that I get done before our Northwest Flower and Garden Festival, before I'm heading into February where I'm really tackling my hydrangeas and my grasses. But you can do this anytime you have a sunny day in the middle of winter and this beautiful, gorgeous plant is dormant. So friends, I hope this has given you a lot of inspiration if you have wisteria in your life to get out there and tackle it. And just remember, pruning is like a mixture of art and science. There's no perfect way to prune something, but I always recommend you come in here, you prune, you step back a little bit. Go in, prune some more, then step back and assess your cuts. And honestly, this actually reminds me of pruning apple trees or fruit trees. So if you've done that before, piece of cake. Okay, I'm gonna see you in the next one. In the meantime, say hello to your garden for me.